All righty. Welcome once again to Escaping Dystopia. My name is Wah. I'll be your host for today's probably somewhat extended episode. Let's verify that we are in a happy town here. Shouldn't be a big deal. What the week, huh, man? Holy cow. Today is May 15th, 2022, roughly 7:04 in the PM here in Mountain Time Zone. We got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, so if you're going to be interested in hanging out, feel free. If not, whatever. I have a good time with all this. Been doing the show for a bit. Having some fun. I do the live show for a few reasons. One, because I think as our media starts to fracture even more, it's going to get crazier. Sorry. Even to get into any of these things now, you got to click on so much stuff. All right. Just making sure our video is going good and our audio sounds wonderful. It does. Okay. We're good. All right. Let's see. The light's a little rough, but we're going to go with it. Okay, then. So what are we going to talk about today? We got a bunch of stuff to talk about. We got our little Spaceship Earth theory to talk about for a bit. We're going to go over some the abortion news over this latest week. Run over some white supremacy, fascism, objective journalism, and free speech, and then a near total collapse of one of the crypto markets, of which I've talked about previously on some of my shows, as well as the DeFi series that I did. So that mea culpa's coming here in a little bit. If you were involved in the Luna and UST collapse, my heart goes out to you. If you are continuing to mock everyone who was involved with it, as many people are enjoying themselves with that week. I'm going to talk about something a little bit later that you're going to realize that maybe that's not the best idea. But we'll get to that in a little bit. No need to fret about and screw around. I will get going here. I was trying to set up the whole Twitch studio thing to stream with YouTube, so I can add the picture-in-picture stuff and start sharing some of the things I'm talking about while I'm doing them. So I'll try and do that here. I've got a little wacky kind of setup with some other stuff. Trying to make sure my microphone stays close enough so it works good. My first few shows had bad voice. So let's get started. Today is, as I noted, May 15th, 2022, episode 117, big news week. Couldn't really come up with a title to encapsulate all this. It's a big brain dump for me. Last week has been extremely difficult, kind of just mentally and emotionally for a lot of people, I know, as we'll talk about one of the issues here. And there's been a lot of stuff going on in the world. And this is all coming off of a couple years worth of COVID and all that's entailed, which has been more than pretty crazy. So to get started, welcome to the show. My name is Wah. I'll be your host. One of the things that we talk about here and I talk about quite a bit is the Spaceship Earth theory. One of the things that I work on generally is, and we'll have some more things hopefully coming out this year, a couple apps and a book and stuff. But the idea here is building a new kind of moral framework. And this is something, the idea of how human beings decide what is good or bad, right? This is the way that we measure the world through a moral lens. This would be kind of the idea is, something like Christianity is a moral framework. I talked to a lot of Christians that was raised in that moral framework and realized a while back that there's some things about it that didn't quite make sense, and then therefore kind of skewed the thing and was leading to people to make some weird decisions and weigh things in ways that I thought was very odd. Spaceship Earth is kind of my marketing term for the theory that I've come up with. There's a lot of other stuff going into the model, some mathematical things. We'll talk about those at some other point. But the idea underlying it is, instead of going with this kind of supernatural deist, very God made you kind of thing, we instead have the underlying facts of humanity being on the general concept that we are, on a spaceship flying through space. It's Spaceship Earth. There was a kind of strange now in context, but it was a Russian cosmonaut telling the story about standing back and floating in space with just the Earth in front of him against the vastness of the emptiness of space and beyond. And he realized how small our little ship was, and the shuttle or whatever they were on, wasn't all that much different from the planet relative to the size of the space that we're in, right? We're going around our sun. Our sun is zooming through this space, but calling our planet Spaceship Earth gives a conceptual way to start to weigh certain questions in a moral framework that gives, I think, a better clarity to the reality that we actually experience while living here. Right. Not the idea that, oh, there's stuff up in the clouds and there's angels. Yeah. So it's a little bit different. One of the things that we talk about too is climate change as well in regards to that, right? Because in this Spaceship Earth, right, we're slowly overheating because we're putting too much of our carbon, right? This essential aspect of any kind of life as we know it, but we're putting too much of it floating around in the air. It's very reactive, bonds with the oxygen, which bonds with everything. This forms CO2. This traps more heat. Eventually, this can cause a runaway process. Our neighboring planet in Venus has seen what happens when that happens. One of the things that people have talked about with global warming a lot is the heat increase. As someone who's moved up to Colorado about, I don't know, 5 years ago now, 7, I don't know, it's been a while. I love it. One of the things that's happened here has not so much been the heat, but the wind. And one of the things that understanding about this whole concept is it's, we talk about it, but global warming, but, one of the aspects of that warmth is, when you really break it down to what heat is at a fundamental physics level, there's more energy in the system. And the way that it comes out is through some of this heat and also these bigger storms as the system tries to work back towards an equilibrium and energy moves from one place to another. Those greater differences, that's literally where wind comes from, is temperature differences, right? The wind, air moving, hot air rises, cold air comes in. Anyway, it's a whole complicated system, but there's been more wind. Like just this week, there was this big, like random, it's called a derecho, just this windstorm that cut across the US. I believe a couple people were killed. If you watch it on radar, it looks like comical. It looks fake because it's moving so fast compared to any other, system like that shows up on radar, right? And it was nearly comical. There's been a huge heat wave in India over the whole country for a while with some just ridiculous temperatures. Texas, which we'll get to a little bit later in a couple other parts of the show, has also had, unseasonably warm weather causing their power grid to fail and cause some issues there. One of the places that also, and this is a little bit more for me, I wanted to talk on this specifically on this subject, Lake Powell and Glen Canyon Dam and the water there. I've been there a few times over my life. Had a really nice trip there when I was younger, going out with my family and my father, and we did some stuff, and I remember swimming out to one of the hoodoos, which are the things, if you go to Bryce Canyon or Zion Canyon up there and you see these big, tall, pieces of rock sticking out of there, right? There are those that were in the water and you could kind of swim out and climb on them. We went back there this last year with my wife and her family and our family, or my family, I should say, our kiddos and her family, lots of folks. And, ended up finding what I think was pretty much the same place, but the water level there has dropped so much that everything that we were doing previously, like the last time I was there, you actually literally had to swim out to get onto this rock that was kind of out there and taller than the others. And now, not only could you walk to that, the water was another 200 feet down the canyon. And apparently this year now it's to that point, getting to the point where there's not enough water to actually, fire the turbines to kick off the energy for the dam. And this drought, this climate change, heat, wind, all of this stuff is real and it's happening. And it's happening in enough that as someone who's nearly 50, not like really close to 50, I'll be around a couple more times. Anyway, I've seen it. It's real. Literally. places that I've been at one time in my life and then go back, they're different. And it's this thing that's happening, right? And this was theorized by science. It was covered. The data was there. We could have had a president who knew about it. Instead, we had the president there for a while, right? Since the year 2000, right? We had Bush there for a bit, and then he didn't believe in this. Then Obama was there. Obama was hampered by the fact that we'll get to this later, talking about white supremacy and fascism. But Obama was hampered. Remember, this is where the Tea Party grew up and didn't even believe he was real. So he believed in it, but it was not particularly effectual. And then from him, we went to Stupid Face, and Stupid Face didn't know anything. He wanted to bomb hurricanes with nuclear weapons, and now it's come out that he thought China had a hurricane cannon. A hurricane cannon. I don't know. It's all you can do is clown. Laugh at the guy. Just laugh at the clown. That's all. That's really all you can do about Donald. So, but there's a whole new generation. This is actually the last topic we'll talk to. So we're not going to get to this for a while, but there's a whole new generation of folks out there that's going to have to live on this planet for a while, including my children. And that's one of the things why I'm engaged with a lot of these issues that are looking at this thing called regenerative finance. And we'll talk about this later. It's one of the problems that we've had tackling climate change as it stands and tackling a lot of these climate problems is that on each kind of segment, as each individual entity makes a decision about what resources to use or how they should be used or what we should do to go forward with this, this profit motive and this return on investment that's directly monetary is so often at odds morally with the Spaceship Earth theory. And this is where when I'm talking about when you're aligning morally, like what is good and what is bad, and then financially what is profitable and what is not, and then ways to figure out to realign essentially this huge mass of chaos that we have with 7 billion, 8 billion of us, all with various pieces of information that we're all trying to put together. But in the same idea, most of us would agree in almost every context, a general moral standpoint about what is good or what is bad or what the weight should be on a lot of these things. But we become so misaligned because of the disconnects, because of the wealth disparity that's out there, because of the information misalignments, right? And so all of these efforts, there are a lot of folks out trying to work on some of these things. We'll talk to that about that more at the end. So my hope for the future continues to exist as we see all this stuff, but I wish we could all agree on the basic facts of what the debate should be about and what the basic facts are about how our planet is changing and why and what we know about that. And so that's why politically I always, these are just basic facts and science. This is where we have to start from. But for 20 years now, that's branded me as some sort of weirdo liberal, whatever. So whatever, fine. Now you'll think I'm going to be a liberal after this next one. I'll tell you that. Abortion. It's a word. It's a scary word for a lot of people, and it's a big word because it is a big thing. It's the name of a medical procedure. It's the name of a big political issue. I have another little short video that I made this week that I'm going to probably post before too long. It's just a couple minutes long, specifically about this. My basic argument for the folks out there. This issue politically here in the U.S. has been so lost in rhetorical bullshit that this whole pro-choice, pro-life argument ignores the actual name of the right in question, which is the right to abortion, which is a human right. The alternative to allowing is forced birth, and this is what people don't quite get on a lot of this biological fundamental level. It's not like there's something else in between these two places, right? It's you allow women to have control over their bodies and end their pregnancies using this medical procedure, or you force them to try and have these children or try and go through childbirth. A lot of folks don't understand how A, dangerous childbirth is, how B, painful it is, how C, hard it is to raise kids. Like I said, and I've told this before, I mentioned this on the Twitter this last week. I'll give a link to my Twitter in here. I talk about that a little bit later. I have a lot of fun with my Twitterers. I talk a lot of smack to. I've learned that it's time to start punching up. I did this show for a few years for some of my friends, and a lot of them liked it, but wasn't kind of getting to the point that I wanted it to. Even when I put some. Anyway, what am I talking about? Moving on. So. The abortion debate is one of those things that, again, I'll be honest with you and straightforward, and this gets to our subject about objective journalism a little bit later, which I think is mainly just journalism that's only filled with facts, objectively true facts. So I am actually a bit of an activist on this issue. I've testified here in Colorado before the legislature a couple times, and will continue to fight for this basic reason that there are people who are trying to take away the rights of my wife and daughters and family. And so, I watched these governors, these, Republican governors go on TV this last week and last day and talk about this issue. And the argument for a long time is, we should put this whole issue, whether or not women have rights, back to the states and let the states decide if women have rights, much like, before the Civil War. All the racists were like, we should let the states decide whether these black people have rights. And now that's shifted, and Republicans are now like, we should let the states decide whether women have rights. And a lot of these states are like, no, women will not have rights here. We are going to outlaw abortion. We're going to, make sure that doesn't happen here. So what all of these governors are doing is condemning women to die. And clearly that's going to happen quite a bit. They're condemning women to give birth to the child of their rapist and probably make them praise it as a gift from God. Now, again, this is the difference between the Christian moral framework, for example, and the Spaceship Earth moral framework. In the Spaceship Earth moral framework, this notion of human rights is fundamental to our existence. There's no external deity, determining this is how you must be. All of these things are things that we are able to use our own reason to determine for ourselves. And as you look at the right to abortion for humanity, you can't be like, we're going to be still free. We're just taking away a right to abortion from those women, not everyone. Let's not, can't play stupid on Spaceship Earth and not, you have to be honest, right? You have to be objectively honest. And so taking away the right to abortion takes it away from everybody. And, forcing birth on women is an inhumane. It's an inhumane role for government to take on. We are moving very quickly toward this kind of flat out government controls your life fascism. And this is part of it. If you watch my show, some of the old ones, you'll hear, over and over me repeat, the fascism is the lies. The lies are the fascism. One of the things it's absolutely inevitable when you govern through the use of lies, that ultimately you will have to enforce that lie through violence. There's no other way to square the reality of the liar with actual reality, except at some point through violence. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit too on our last issue. All of this stuff ties together, folks. Spherical reasoning, and it's part of the model. So the fascism and the lies on this, and as you see people lie about abortion and the rights that they're taking away, and these, we're going to do so much to protect those women. We're going to make sure that they have the best care and those babies get the best home afterwards. Governor, have you done anything to actually provide funding for any of these services? It's really important we not waste taxpayer dollars on things they don't. Sir, you just said you're going to force women to have these children. Are you guys paying for any of these services that you're talking? Well, again, those women they need to take that personal responsibility. And after they do, they'll find that, I knocked out this girl and she, whatever, but I was able to personally responsible take care and borrow some money from daddy to start my company. And that's why I'm governor. So, a lot of the South is just so full of shit, and it's tough. It's tough to deal with sometimes, I'm not going to lie. Oh, moving on to our next issue, white supremacy and fascism. Again, like I was saying, these issues of power and control are tied together. This Republican issue, and I've said this for years, this is what my whole show has been about, y'all. Like, as their policies lose popular favor, they have to cheat to win. And as they cheat to win and lie to win, further and further down the road, we get closer and closer to them needing to use straight violence. And we saw it this week. People were gunned down in a supermarket for no other reason than being black. That's insanity. And it doesn't happen without help. It doesn't happen without somebody telling you to do this. Tucker Carlson has this show. They talk about this great replacement theory all the time. All the time. At the same time, they're talking about this great replacement theory, which is that, oh, them minorities, they coming to replace you. Them minorities, they coming to take your job. They're all the, you can't trust them minorities. They're coming, And at the same time, there's this critical race theory. No, this is them just trying to steal stuff. This is minorities trying. Critical race theory is them trying to make you feel bad about how bad they sucked at losing. I mean, again, like, what do they even know? You have the same people banning books on talking about the history of racism in the U.S. The same people watching the news show, Fox, every night, talking about this great replacement theory. They're the same people. The same people endorsing the government, taking away the rights of women. The same people worried about those minorities. And people are dead. And again, it's happened. It happened in El Paso. It's happened here. It's going to happen again. Guys, everybody, if you hear this, you watch it, you got to understand this is what's going on. I started this show because I saw all this coming, right? And see it happening and want to just scream in my basement about it. So I feel better. Damn it. This gamer culture, 4chan, trolling as fashion on the way there and doing all this bullshit, this racist stuff, and this outlet for people losing their social status that always was taken for granted and now is lost. I posted a couple tweets about this earlier, and I wish I could put these folks together and understand that the empathy is the right answer here. I have a man, it sucks. It's so hard to explain this kind of stuff. Twitter is absolutely horrible about it with its short characters and all that. But as you know, as is clear, as this happened once again, as people were gunned down for this simple reason, this white supremacy, this fascism is here. This is all tied together with the way Republicans are talking about stuff. Critical race theory was, and the United States is a country based on ideals. Again, the whole idea was that we take the best ideas that human beings had up to that point and create a government around them. And now as we look back even 200 years ago, we realize a lot of them were pretty shitty, but a lot of them were pretty good. And we found a way, and there's even the more enlightened ones, as they called them back then, 200 plus years ago, right? Knew that they needed to have rules that weren't written in stone so that we could update them, so they didn't have rules carved into tablets. A lot of these guys did understand this Spaceship Earth theory, that we are the guiders, we are the pilots of our own ship, right? We are the arbiters of our own destiny. So we get to determine what that looks like. And this is why the ongoing conversation. I have a great deal of faith in the upcoming generations as they have learned to use our technology to communicate effectively. I hope that some of this really strong empathy that comes out there takes over. I hope that a lot of these crypto boys and all these young lads figure out that if you really want to get laid, what you really need to do is treat whoever you're trying to get laid with as a human being, you'll realize that human beings have a innate desire for pleasure once they feel safe and protected as you move up those needs. So I don't know what to say under this. It's happened. It's here. This is what's going on. The political lines, I can't tell the difference. I can't tell the difference. I look at what's going on here with these white supremacists cutting down black people in the street and talking about their replacement theory. But at the same time, sometimes someone once said that I was a racist because I said something, and I wasn't even sure what it was that I said. But they said, well, that's kind of racist. And I said, well, I am not. I am a good person. I am not a racist. I'm going to go hang out with these fascists. Yeah. The white fucking, it's that whole thing. And one of the things that's, I mean, again, there's in the mediated online social media computer world as fucking stupid face. And now, again, as we segue into our next subject, it's a bunch of bullshit on Twitter. Bunch of bots, bunch of crap, bunch of just people buying things, bunch of scams, bunch of nothing. You open up a protocol. Hello, we segueing into the last one, Roy? Not yet. You open up a protocol to the world, and it's dangerous. People are gonna bullshit. My first like real like long-term website that I built. It was called quantumphilosophy.net. And I did it for a long time. I hosted it out of my room in Linux back in the 20th century. I had this whole setup as the whole nine. Had the CMS set up that was based on this open source software. I run it all. And it was doing fine. It was actually getting up there. And I started to get really good trust on Google, which was the thing. Like my trust score was, like, oh, shit. Oh, okay, cool. And so, and I was posting about a lot of stuff. But then these bots took over. And there was some security flaw in the database, and they just posted constantly and just kept taking it on the site. And I didn't have enough time, and life intervened, and it all died and went out. And I lost the URL, and I've been through a couple cycles of poverty like this and things like that. But our media and these not poverty, whatever. Never not going to have the education that I grew up. I'm never not going to have the mind that I have. I'm never not going to have the body as long as it works. And if all those continue to exist, I have plenty of resources. Anyway, whatever. I don't know why I dropped that word, but I've been quite poor before. I will say that, and effectively had no net worth. And now I'm broadcasting to you from my basement. So, but Elon Musk has more money than me. He's got too much money. He's going through this divorce, fourth divorce. I don't know. I guess one of them was to the same woman twice. He's got some issues. He's not going to buy Twitter. It's on a pause. There's been, a huge pullback. So the interest rates rose, and we'll talk about interest rates and all the economic stuff at the end here. But they're going up, so you have to justify, borrowing money now, and just I want to own the libs is not. And he literally tweeted this week about how expensive it was to own the libs, and it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Can we say fuck? Yeah, I don't know. I can say it. Can you go to the bathroom, Mr. Taylor? Yes, I can. Thank you. So anyway. Musk and Twitter. So journalism is an interesting thing. So I can actually speak to this a little bit. So I do have a degree in this mass communication thing. I actually studied this quite a bit. Wrote a bit about it, read some books about it. Didn't spend a whole lot of time doing it because our corporate media, I should say, didn't time a whole lot doing it for our corporate media. Since my education, I've basically been a nonstop writer and reader, and more of like I'd say a news editor without a staff for 20 years now. So plus I'm old, like I said, 25 years doing this, decentralized media thing. I always called it what I used to call it nano media. And I've watched our media corporations and the whole industry change dramatically, and some of it hasn't changed, and some of the survivors have been, and they are survivors at this point because the economic, again, what Amazon and a lot of internet companies have done to flatten the costs for a lot of business activities, Salesforce, I mean, Amazon Cloud, as they, take and virtualize all these services and make it a lot cheaper, the same thing's happening for news media, and the competition for how much it takes to get, somebody to spend 5 minutes watching your thing. Do you have to, send a professional on location, have an editor write this with a good style and do all this kind of stuff, or can you just have somebody start making up BS? And so the making up BS is, of course, kind of taken over. And then you had the same thing with computers, then taking all the social media and organizing that into worthwhile time and content that people seem to enjoy quite a bit, with a bit of editorial control. So our media has changed so much, and this notion of objectivity is always been a very difficult one. The notion, and I posted about this too, and I would challenge the idea that any media outlet that accepts advertisement and isn't completely transparent about their funding sources has some objectivity issues, or at least blind spot issues, where they're not going to properly represent or underrepresent a particular subject, right? Which, of course, is wildly obvious with some of the completely blown out right-wing media that we see nowadays. But to me, this notion of an objective journalist, and I find the way that people have moved to using blander language in order to not be technically incorrect ends up building a picture of the world that's not accurate. And in order to get the detailed, fine-tuned picture of the world that is necessary for making really accurate decisions, you need someone who's going to step beyond words that won't offend people who disagree with them, people who disagree with basic facts. And we avoid saying basic facts in order to sell advertising to them and their companies, which is where most of our corporate media is in America. So much so that there's no Sunday show, no newspaper, none of those are close to objective media. They're not. They're too biased by what they can't talk about, what they can't say, to really even and hold that. They're corporate media, right? And corporations are not people, despite us treating them like them. The New York Times bros for abortion, the forced birth guys, all of these opinion guys who've been around for a long time have been able to dance around this bullshit and try and just do these euphemisms. But like I covered earlier in the show, unless you're willing to put forth this money. By the way, there were these protests at the Supreme Court justices' homes. According to the opinion that I saw, like, all of the conservative justices are pretty comfortable with the notion that their homes would be considered safe havens, right, for people to drop off unwanted children that have made it to term. Because again, there's this idea that there aren't any of those, and so, or that adoption or stuff would be a good counter to forced birth. But those aren't like per se rational things, and this is where we're at, unfortunately, as a country, where we have these completely irrational arguments that aren't based in any kind of fact being pushed by people who were elevated to the Supreme Court by a minority of the country in elections. And people, oh, it's a republic, it's It's a republic. I have heard. I'm very good. I am, in fact, very educated. It's a republic. It is not a democracy. And we, as a republic, it is therefore each individual entity's rights to decide who has rights or not. Like with slavery, where each side. Wait, well, not with slavery. I mean, with abortion, where each state gets to decide who's a real woman or not. It's a republic. Hey, did you know that republics are a kind of democracy? The thing that's sad about this right-wing media stuff is that these guys are all just so dumb and pathetic, and they don't ever interact with anybody who will tell them basic facts they don't agree with that make them feel bad. I have got this whole thing to talk about because just understanding what libertarianism is, and that's when you've kind of like fallen into this trap of believing that your own feelings are in fact facts. And if you're ever into that place and start to think that you're the one who defines everything for the world, you're wrong. I was thinking about something earlier today, and our species is we're social creatures. We really are, and our survival as a species is based on that social aspect. We are not individually, immortality is not the survival of our species. That doesn't count. Anybody who wants, oh well, I'll just fly to another planet and survive. Like, no, let's what do you say we fix this planet? Let's fix this one. Let's fix this one. Because there's much better chance for our species to survive if we keep Spaceship Earth in good shape instead of some asshole flies off to Mars. To own the libs. God, so pathetic. You know what's wild is Musk has not, I don't believe, a single time this week, Mr. Super Human Rights Musk tweeted about abortion or said anything about it, or I don't even cares about it as a human right. That's what's so just like this blind spot of libertarian douche bros. It's like, hey, if you guys really cared about actual liberty and human rights and people being able to live their lives free from the government, you would have stormed those facilities down on the border when the government started taking away kids from their families with your ARs. And you'd also been marching protection for all these women this last weekend. And by the way, if you had done that, you would have gotten so fucking laid. But you didn't. So huge opportunity out there, gentlemen, to be decent, be the kind of decent human being that another female human being then wants to reproduce with, therefore creating longevity and immortality for your genetic structure and a great deal of actual pleasure and happiness if you want to do that. Because as I said on the Twitter this week, raising children is one of the single greatest sources of joy in my life. And it's also something I would not wish on anyone who didn't want to do it. It's so fucking hard. But it's so rewarding if you want to do it. Forced birth is fascism, guys. All right, so moving on to the fun stuff. All right, last episode piece. So my apologies to everybody. I hope everyone out there is okay who got burned by Mr. Do Kwon's failures. I've got a video out there, and I'll make link to it, but I'm trying not to promote this stuff too much at this point, on how to transfer value, right? So you work, the way that it generally works nowadays is you work, someone gives you money in exchange for the time that you've done work for them. My video showed people how to take some of that value, convert it into a cryptocurrency, and then send it over a network and then deposit it into another protocol. Over the last couple of weeks, that protocol, Luna, UST, Terra, collapsed. And it was, we'll see what the complete postmortem is. Everybody, of course, is completely and utterly sure it was going to collapse at this point, right? Which, of course, hindsight is what it is. And there were a number of people who had some really strong warnings. Anybody who did that and actually believed in it should be prancing around now because they would be billionaires if they knew exactly when and how it was going to collapse. Again, because of the nature of these cryptocurrency markets, pardon me, openness, all of that. Anybody who knew exactly when and where Terra was going to collapse could easily have collected 10, $20 billion. If that person exists, right? Because a lot of people, everyone knew it was going to collapse. Just a matter of when. Well, I guess that matter of when is either A, last week, next week, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 6 months ago. That's a big question. So, inflation and UST. One of the things that was really interesting about UST and over the last year, inflation in the US and the US dollar, which is very important in the crypto world because everything's basically valued in dollars. We China banned crypto, and since they're the only other large enough economy to really support this kind of stuff, we're not valuing everything in RMB, so it's all in USD. UST was an attempt to provide that kind of new challenge in a decentralized way. I'm not going to go too far into the mechanics of it, but basically, if you want to be the world's reserve currency, you gotta make people lock stuff up, I think, in ways that make it so they can't do what happened here. Hyperinflation is also something that's very difficult to deal with on the currency side. I am not a complete currency expert, obviously. And anybody who claims to at this point, again, they'll have $5 billion to show you because, again, shorting Luna would have been super easy if you knew exactly when and where to do it. Shorting UST would have been even more immensely profitable. So we'll see where some or any of that money ended up this next little bit. So it's pretty wild because and more little background. So some of my consulting background is actually in financial consulting for big financial stuff. I actually worked a little bit on Lehman and in the 2008 financial collapse. I was actually closing banks for a while. That was the end of my consulting career was right about then. That was when I got out of that, did some other stuff, met my wife, and started to create a new life. So anyway, I was closing banks on the weekend. So bank runs are difficult. There's a lot of banks in the US that failed during this period. It wasn't on the news. It wasn't something that people talked about because banks, money, value, all of these things are social phenomenons. Again, I mentioned this earlier. We're social creatures. These are all social phenomenon, and when people start to run on banks and start to do it, they can cause nearly any financial institution to collapse like this. Looking back on my own behavior for the collapse, and I'll be honest. So I was using UST as basically kind of a hedge, right? So a lot of crypto is very, very volatile in price. And so literally for this month, I was, taking every day, taking a certain amount of my staking rewards, converting them into what's called a stable coin and putting them away. The same strategy would have worked absolutely perfectly if I had just sent them to my crypto.com card. The reason why I didn't convert them to spendable fiat is quite simply that inflation number, right? We've been seeing very large inflation number on the dollar side for a while. Interest rates are going up now. So the idea was to hope to try and beat some of that. I didn't think 20% was at least sustainable for multiple years. But in the history of monetary systems, double-digit interest rates have been potentially sustainable for years or two, right? This is when you start to get into the actual monetary system, hyperinflation and things. There's some math that goes into a lot of this stuff, but because as you start to raise interest rates, and I'm talking about higher returns on rates and compound interest, the numbers start to do very, very different things. But what we've gone to over this last week by this first interest rate rise in so long, moving from essentially zero interest to our first what was it? I think it was 75 or 50 basis points, like 0.5%, 0.75%. But the difference between free money, right, between money that you can borrow at zero interest, which means that, as far as for investment or any kind of other speculation to anything that money does is going to do better than if that money was just sitting there, right? And that money doesn't cost anything to really use for something else. So as long as you're at that break-even point or any kind of return, you're in good shape. Now, as interest rates start to go up, money is not free anymore to borrow, right? So everywhere along the line, kind of like a vet, right? Everything now has to get that extra return or it's falling behind. Anybody involved with this stuff knows that the more you fall behind on progressive interest rates, the more it's just not going to happen. So again, anybody who's got credit cards and all that now, again, pay them off because rates are going to go up and those rates go up. And if you fall behind now, as by the way, and just to touch on one of our earlier subjects, women who are denied abortions are pretty much, I think it was like 80%. The reason why a lot of women choose to abort is absolutely economic. And this is something that the crypto bros, I know I just slammed it on you guys if you're listening to this, don't get this kind of thing, is because it's just what happened with Luna is similar to someone who does not want to be pregnant being denied an abortion to somebody. The economic impacts are large, and it will take years to recover, if ever, for people who are very hurt by this. By the way, anybody who is doing crypto, do not invest money you are not prepared to lose. Money that you need should not be in this kind of stuff, right? And so that's one of the things that lets me kind of shake off that kind of loss. It's like, well, that's an unfortunate thing, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the Luna UST things. Unfortunately, some of them are lessons that very much should have been learned last time. Like, don't go on stage and scream UST BitConnect. There's video of that. Oh man, we'll see. It's as the whole. It's weird. Like the crypto community is very interesting to watch, but he just had a daughter a while ago, and he named her after his project, which is just, oh man, pride. It's a beast. I was lucky enough to be humbled by reality a while back. Pain does that. So I would like to say something real quick, and we're gonna kind of end on this. It's been a fun show for me, so I appreciate you sticking around. I had a lot to talk about today. Where are these crypto boys gonna go? That's a good question. Are they gonna be socialists or fascists? I don't know, but I will say this: there is a global culture of people who are very hungry for opportunity, who see a global system that appears to be pretty entrenched for those who are in power. They are very smart, very technologically capable, very connected. They know what is potentially capable with some of these things that we're doing. The disruptions, as we've seen over the last 20, 30 years, are profound that are possible with new technology. And I think it's going to be pretty wild. I think we'll see, because I think this Web 2 is kind of settled a little bit as far as like how the tech works, and it seems to be getting a little bit more entrenched. The Web 3 stuff, which can be how our money works globally, we'll see how that works. There's always a lot of risks on global stuff and things like that. I would say the biggest risk for the US dollar at this point would be Republicans, of course, taking control again and doing their thing at a point when we can't really afford it which we won't be able to for a while. We're pretty on the edge. Donald is really bad at money. Like really bad. Anyway. All right. So anyway, those boys are all out there becoming men through pain. And hopefully they can find the right way to empathize with the right folks in order to get laid and have families. and be good people doing good things and not fascist white supremacists murdering people. And it sucks that that's out there as an option. Stuff is pretty deep and painful sometimes to talk about. As the show has been not light on heavy subjects. So I appreciate everybody who's stuck through it at some point in the future. It's always nice to talk. If you need to reach out and talk to somebody about some of the stuff or any of the things I've said, please feel free. I do have DMs open here and on Twitter as well, especially on the abortion side. If you've made it to the end of this, or if you see this later, and if you have questions or you're wondering if you need help, I know a number of organizations who can help people get help out of the fascist red states, the pro-life states, the forced birth states. If you need help funding or just some just resources, they're out there, and I can actually probably maybe personally help you connect you with stuff. So if you need that, you can try the DMs. I don't even know if I read my direct messages on YouTube. I get to be old and out of touch with all technology now. It's awesome. Even though I've been sitting at 5 different computers for 30 years. Anyway, all right. So everybody, you guys have a great evening. Thanks for listening. If anybody ever does, if these end up only being archives for my kiddos to know their old dad when he wasn't so old and crotchety. What's up, kiddos? Love you guys. All right. You guys have a great night. Take care. Bye-bye.